Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct honor of introducing you to Maria Matarelli. Now, I want you to be clear about this. Maria is not being asked here just because she's a woman. She simply happens to be a woman who is an amazing speaker and a great representative of what women have achieved in the agile environment that we now live in. So, not just as project managers, but as professionals in technically based fields, Maria has seen, been involved with, and accomplished a little bit more than you might realize. Maria, at what point did you get absolute, just absolute clarity about what you were going to do next with your leadership and to grow your leadership?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that question. And this takes me back to my days when I was a traditional project manager, actually. And I remember managing $5 million projects a year and so many team members, hundreds of team members, and very serious deadlines for a Fortune 50 company. And I remember as I was managing these projects, I remember thinking, this makes a lot of sense to me in project management. It's very systematic. It's very detail oriented and organized. And I remember I'd get through my week, like halfway through the week, I'd be done with all my work. And yet I had to be on site because I had to have billable hours, right? And I was looking at this system and it's okay, so I'm very efficient and I'm doing great work, and yet I have to be here to check the box of being in this cubicle, right? And I remember thinking, is there anything more to life than working in an office? And it was in those days that I started to realize if you want to create the life that you want, if you want more than the status quo, you might have to do more than the average person that you sit next to, that you work next to. And I started racking my brain thinking, what could I do to get ahead? As one of the youngest people in the organization, I was fresh out of college. And I remember thinking, there's got to be something other than working in the same job for 20, 30 years. And so that's when I started exploring other opportunities. And this is where they say leadership is taken, not given, right? And so looking for opportunities, getting involved with my local Project Management Institute chapter, the Central Illinois chapter. I became VP of operations for a couple years. I started my own Agile group, so the Illinois Regional Agile Users Group, and started bringing people together to talk about these Agile concepts. And I remember the one thing that really, I think, was a big change component for me was when I started stepping out of my comfort zone to speak at events and conferences. And that's where I found that having a voice, being able to articulate ideas and share things is absolutely going to set you apart from the crowd. And I was so uncomfortable the first time I presented in front of a big audience. I know, right? Yeah, you might not think that, but we all crawl before we walk, and we walk before we run. And I was terrified, like not really, but like I was nervous and didn't want to consciously be nervous. But I remember my voice was a little shaky, and I was a little uncertain on how to say things, and started sweating and like panicking a little bit internally. And I'm in front of like 300-400 people, and I'm like, oh goodness, all these people are staring at me, right? And I just remembered you have to find confidence from within. And even if you don't fully feel it, like stepping into that, you have to do something different than the average person if you want to be a leader, right? And so it's looking for those opportunities to step up and to do more than the status quo and more than the person next to you. And since then, just getting out of my comfort zone to speak at other conferences and events led to traveling the world throughout Europe and Asia and speaking at global events from there. And so, when you look at that moment for leadership, for me, it was an unrest and an unwillingness to just accept the status quo as this is what my life will be, working in this office every single day until I retire. And so realizing that I can take that bold step, I can do something different, and then beginning to make those moves.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me just be clear about this. Maria and I met because I was so impressed with the way she handled a particular event here in the Chicagoland area. And I just never forgot the professionalism, the confidence, but also Maria's an approachable person. You don't get intimidated by her unless you are intimidated by competence and, smarts and things like that. But There you go. So when she said she was nervous, I remember thinking, wow, you did a beautiful job in getting over that. So because you have been able to get such a breadth of experience and you've worked with such a wide range of individuals, one thing that sometimes bothers me is that we aren't always as open about the kinds of challenges that we face repeatedly. It's almost sort of like we're not supposed to talk about the fact that we're still running into this problem even now. And so, what kinds of issues have you found that, oh my God, I slayed that dragon last week over here, and apparently it had kids, and now I need to do it over here? I mean, what are the challenges you've been facing on a repeated basis?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because a lot of times people talk about the successes, but they don't always focus on the challenges or the roadblocks to get there as much as I think they have overcome, right? There's so many hurdles that we have to leap past to get to where we are often in our careers. And for me, the repeated challenge, if I was to pick one thing, I would say it's probably being underestimated, being young in the workforce, being sometimes underestimated as a female in a man's like a more male dominated industry, IT project management. And what's interesting is I've never really looked at it as male versus female because I've always just looked at it as I am a project manager. I am a person that is a project manager. And I don't see that gender has to be part of that. But I definitely have had people that have told me that I look young, or when, especially even like 10 years ago, looked young, and
You still
saying,
do.
hey, thank you, but saying, hey, do you have the experience? And it's like, okay, so the perception is that I'm not experienced because I look young, right? Or even when the room is mostly men, like, will they listen to me? And also in other cultures, right? In other cultures where, overseas, maybe in South Asia and other areas like that. And so I do remember a distinctive moment where I was getting ready to lead a training class for a fairly large organization in the Midwest, and I was up near Chicago. And one of the coordinators for this event, he actually asked to meet with me the day before the training, and so we went and we connected. We met up when I got into town, and as we're getting ready to leave, he said, "So I just have one more thing. I just want to say." And he said, "I'm a little concerned. This training class is full of senior leaders, and I'm just not sure that they're going to really listen to you, or that you're going to be able to be effective in this training class because you are younger. And, as a female, are these older, experienced executives going to listen to your expertise?" And I did appreciate that he said it because it was a concern he had. So I appreciated having the opportunity to do the class and not being not allowed to or not selected for the training opportunity. But it was also very interesting to me because but it also wasn't shocking because I've had it so many times before. And I remember I just, without even missing a beat or taking a breath, I just said, "Oh, thank you for sharing your concern. I'm not worried one bit. And here's the reason why. This is what I do. I am an agile trainer and coach. I'm very experienced. I have years of experience. I do this training around the world. It took me 4 years to get certified as a Scrum trainer. There's only 300 people in the world that can even do that. I've already been vetted through these third parties. And I went through, 4 years to get certified. That's a long time. That's a lot of having to prove yourself, right?" And so I let him know. I was like, "Oh, thank you for sharing your concern. I'm not concerned at all. And I'm confident that when I get into the room and I begin to teach the material that I'm an expert in, that I am experienced in, that knowledge will speak for itself." And sure enough, what happened the next day, I get into the room, and right. And sometimes I will say, sometimes when I talk to people, I do intentionally speak a little fast when they're questioning my capability. It's like, well, we're talking about an iterative development framework, and it's the process methodology is the most effective framework that's being used around the world by Fortune 100 companies. And we've been teaching this training in Shanghai, Singapore, Thailand, India. Like, if you want to question me on that, you're welcome to, but I will be able to back it up. So I've always had the confidence in my expertise, in my experience, that I'm not really taking it as an insult. And it's one of those things where I believe you just show up and deliver the value, and that speaks for itself. I've also had a friend, another fellow consultant, that was overheard a conference call that I was on once, as I was preparing for another meeting, and he caught the tail end of it. And after the call, he was like, "You have incredible patience." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I just listened to this guy mansplain to you over the last however many minutes, and just he felt like the guy was being condescending." And I was like, which part? I was like, that's how almost every call goes that I'm on, right? And what was interesting was to get a third party perspective on something that, oh, that's just how a lot of men are sometimes in business, right? And I don't know if they mean to, but they might think they need to over explain things. And I said, well, what I do, I just let people talk and, share their knowledge or expertise that they want to share. And then I wait until the end, and then I kind of look at how I can turn the conversation to what's the outcome that I want, right? If someone wants to share with me how they know they've been doing this for 20, 30 years longer than me, and they have all this more experience, great, thank you for sharing that. So what's the next step? Are we moving forward? Would you like to do training? Was there coaching? Is there anything that I can add value to what you're doing? And so what's interesting is that I don't always notice it because it just happens so frequently. And I don't mind being underestimated because I will show up and deliver the value, right? And so interestingly enough, that I would say if there is one thing that's been a common theme, it would be that it's people may be assuming because of youth or other factors that, oh, are you intelligent? Do you know your stuff? And well, please just give me the opportunity to speak. So, I think when you look at what's going on in the society, in the industry, I've never really looked at it as the male versus female. I've just looked at competent or not competent. Can you get the job done? And when I look back at the case studies of the companies I've worked with, the projects that have been successful, my first jobs out of college were the enterprise server release, Windows Unix server upgrades, Windows and Unix server upgrades for a systems technology department of a Fortune 50 company. And within a couple of years, we'd actually streamlined those projects. I just come off of working with another company where we'd done Six Sigma and Lean. And so we looked at how can we streamline this, become more effective, and how we work. And what we were able to do was take a $3 million budget and reduce it to $1.5 million annual cost savings by going from 2 releases to 3 a year, freeing up our on-site people for more strategic work, and then offshoring some of the work to other people. And I mean, the results speak for themselves. So even when you look at agile, empirical data, empirical evidence, if you have the confidence to do what you do, right? And especially as a speaker or a trainer and a coach and consultant, it's just looking for the opportunity to be able to deliver that value. And so if people have any preconceived notions of what does an executive coach or trainer look like, well, there's other factors than just what does that executive coach or trainer look like. It's what is their experience? What is their knowledge and expertise that they can share? What have they done? And how can they add value? What's the result? What's the outcome that you want? So, whenever there's an opportunity to just demonstrate value or share knowledge, I'm always open to doing that. And so, people, they have maybe preconceived notions when they first see someone or meet someone. And so my thought is always, if I have to prove myself 1,000 times, I will, because I can, and I'm willing to.
And I think that that's an important point. Unfortunately, I wasn't bright enough to figure it out. I happened to be talking to someone and they said, "So you're going to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in that entire room that doesn't have a PhD or multiple master's degrees. I'm still working on my first one, possibly only one." And he looked at me and he said, "Great, so they can explain to you everything you ever wanted to know or didn't want to know about nuclear thermodynamics and physics, but they need you to help them figure out how to organize and then communicate to get results. And that's what you're an expert in. So stand on where you are strong." He said, "I've seen you and I've seen your record, you're strong." And I remember thinking, oh, I would have paid for that counsel. Um, but part part of what I think makes you so powerful is that you are strong and confident, and you're strong enough to give grace to the people who can't help themselves. They have got to just make you understand what they're worried about, where you're concerned, and things like that. I'm with your colleague. It does take patience, but it also takes grace. Um, but given all of that, because we're asking people for very specific things that folks can start doing immediately, whether they realize they actually have the capacity for it right now or not, what is the one thing that you think you would love our colleagues to do to grow their leadership?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because we all have to start somewhere, right? And for me, it was looking for the opportunities that were above and beyond just the minimum requirements for my day job, right? If you do the minimum, well, that's your status quo, and you may make progress in your career in advance at a regular pace. But if you'd like to do something above and beyond, it's that stepping into the leadership. And I had a really great insight that I was able to learn when I was working actually in one of my first leadership positions with the VP of Operations for the Project Management Institute Central Illinois chapter. I remember there was a moment that I was talking with the president, and he was talking about he was coming toward the end of his term. And at that point, it's like, okay, who would be the next president? Now, often that might be someone that's already on the board of directors because they have understanding on how the chapter operates. They understand some of the relationships that you need to have. They know how these things work, rather than someone just straight from the outside. And one of the things that he was saying is he was saying something about, I'm looking for someone that shows the interest. I'm looking for the qualities of someone who wants more than just their current role, right? So, you could be in a role as VP and be okay with that, but he's looking for who shows that those extra qualities or that extra interest of wanting to step up into that leadership role. And I remember that I was thinking, I was like, ooh, could that be me, right? Would I be the next president? But at this time, I just accepted a consulting job in Chicago. And so I was 2 hours north of where I was living at the time. And I remember thinking, I don't know that I'm going to be in town and be available to do this effectively in this role, to continue with that chapter. But I remember thinking, there's other leadership roles and in other organizations from there. But it always stuck with me that when we were talking about this, and he was even like, talking about a couple of the people, well, this person has showed some interest, or this person has exhibited, going above and beyond, or caring about the greater organization beyond just their current role. And I had never really realized before that moment that leaders are looking for other leaders. And so we need to communicate or exhibit things that would be indicators of what it is that we're trying to do, right? So if there was someone who stepped up and said, hey, I know that your term is coming to an end, and I would love to understand or shadow more of what you do to see if it's something that I might be a good fit for, or here's the qualities that I think are very strong that could support me being in this role. And I would love to hear from you. What do you think I could improve upon to be the most effective in a further leadership role? Right? People don't ask that often. And so imagine if someone did say that, that makes that decision for who's the next person in line for that leadership position much, much easier. Another thing that I noticed was this happened twice in college, and then also when I was in Chicago. It happened again with another organization that I was working with. And I remember in college, I joined the Student Philosophies Association. Now, I joined the Student Philosophy Association because I heard that the teacher who I had for my class, he was a very challenging teacher. He was very strict. But people said that because he was the faculty sponsor of the Student Philosophy Association, if you join the Student Philosophy Association, you got more face time with him. He'd know who you were, build more rapport. He might not be as like regimented and, like no zero chances or anything else, right? Like it's super strict. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go check this out. And I remember as we're sitting in there, we voted and people volunteered and were nominated for the different roles. So we had like the VP, the secretary, the treasurer, right? And there were multiple hands up for each of these different roles. When it came time for president, all the hands were down. And I remember looking around and I was like, why is nobody wanting to step up to this leadership role? And I realized that I believe there was a perception that it was going to be very challenging or difficult or a lot of weight on your shoulders. And so I remember looking around, I was like, well, this might be a defining moment, but I also really want this class to go easy for me. And I raised my hand and I was like, I'll be president. And I ran unopposed, right? And so what was really cool was, as president, I got to make final call on what were the things that we debated, right? Like, so we had some really cool and creative debates, and all the other roles. I remember looking at the people in those roles, thinking, I feel like they're doing way more like hands-on work than I am, right? Like, I'm making a lot of the decisions, I'm providing direction, I'm providing the guidance. And I saw this replicated again when I joined a Toastmasters club in Chicago, the professional speaking organization. I remember I was working with a company, and we had another company actually in Manitoba, Canada, that wanted us to do a 4-day agile training. Now, at this point, I had barely spoken in public ever, and I was terrified. I was like, how do you speak for 8 hours in a day, 4 days in a row? Like, what do you even say? Like, how is there not like these awkward pauses that you have to, like, how do you even navigate this? And I remember that as I joined, I was like, well, let me find a Toastmasters group. So I found a club, I joined it. And actually, it was before I even officially joined. It was the first time I was there. They were actually voting in new officers. It was the terms were changing. And they filled the VP of education, the VP of membership, all the roles except for president. And they're like, anyone for president, anyone for president. And I'm like, well, deja vu, right? I was like, well, I've worked with other organizations before. Surely it can't be that much more complicated. And I looked around and I was like, hey, I'll volunteer. And they're like, okay, great. And they're like, well, let's process your membership first, and let's like run this by our, one of the other VPs. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I ended up being their president. And I remember thinking, why do people shy away from the top leadership opportunity? And perhaps it seems like a lot of responsibility. Perhaps there's unknowns. Perhaps they haven't been in that role before. But I remember thinking, like, this is where you have the ability to create the most influence. You have the ability to help set the tone for the organization. You have the ability to be a great leader, right? Like, we've seen and experienced great leaders, and we've seen poor leaders, and that are difficult to work with and work for. And so, like, you can be that change. You can be that inspirational person. And so one of the takeaways I have from this, and talking about people that might be wanting to get into leadership but not sure what to do, is it's being willing to take that bold step and being confident even before you truly feel it. And this reminds me back to even speaking in front of people in public. And I remember thinking, how do I want them to perceive me? Like, I was shaking in my boots the first time I spoke in front of like 500 people, and I was just like, like super nervous, but I got through it, and it got easier every time, right? It's like a muscle that you exercise, you can get better at. And I remember thinking, how do I want people to perceive me versus whatever I am feeling is irrelevant. And so I'm going to project that confidence if I don't feel it. And eventually I may one day feel it. And that's what happened. And so even with these leadership opportunities, I feel like people shy away from it because maybe they're not sure what all it entails, or maybe they're not ready for it, or maybe they just don't want the responsibility. But that's when you do above and beyond the bare minimum, that's where you unlock worlds of opportunity for yourself. And so I just want to encourage people to look for the opportunity. Talk about what your goals are, what you want. I remember even just wanting to be a professional speaker. I just started talking about it all the time. Hey, yeah, I want to be a professional speaker. I want to be a professional speaker. I went through a leadership program, and it was an EMEA for like Europe and Asia and Middle East. And it started off in Marseille, France. And then we had a meeting in Marrakesh, Morocco. And the graduation was in Istanbul, Turkey. This is the Leadership Institute Master's class for the Project Management Institute. And I remember, like, then we were talking about who's going to speak at our graduation. I was the youngest person out of the 20 people in our class, and we spanned over 10 countries for all of us. And I remember, because I was constantly talking about what I wanted to do and what my goals were. And yeah, hey, I love speaking. Hey, I'm developing these talks on Agile. And hey, if you ever need a speaker, let me know. Because I was always talking about it, I'm who they thought of. So we actually voted as a class, and it was myself and another member, because there were 2 people to speak, as me and Fabio. And I remember thinking, man, yeah, I was thinking, if I had not been talking about me wanting to be a speaker, they probably wouldn't have thought of me. But even as the youngest person in our class, I was one of the people selected. And so when you think about Leadership is taken, not given, being willing to step up and do the extra mile. When you have clarity around your goals and where you want to be, even if you don't really know crystal clear the end goal, if you at least know the next step, or then a step from there, and then you can step and pivot, at least getting one step forward to try something out, that can unlock a world of opportunities. So, for those that are thinking about possibly stepping into leadership role or doing something different than just the bare minimum of your job, what I would say is look for the opportunity. Express the interest in moving up or being a leader. Find someone who's already doing the role you want to do and ask if you can learn from them. Ask if you can shadow them. Ask if you can observe some meetings, because that's going to give you that extra edge, and they're going to be thinking about you if there is an opportunity for promotion or for stepping into a bigger role.
So be bold, but you can only be bold if you actually see that opportunity. So keep an eye out for that opportunity. Be clear, understand what it is that you want to do, and give people the opportunity to help you do that.
Yes.
But also be confident in what you are capable of, even if you're saying, well, I'm going to be really good at that, and give it a chance to come out of you.
Yeah.
So, not a fan of the term fake it till you make it. What I tell people is if you're not aspirational about what you are capable of becoming, it's kind of hard for other people to want to help you, to be
Yeah,
willing to.
absolutely.
Yeah. Maria, an amazing lady, ladies and gentlemen. Do follow her on social media because she has things that to say that are worth listening to. And Maria, thank you so very much for your time.
Yes, thank you. And if you'd like to stay connected with me, you can find me online at findmaria.com and click through to all my social media from there.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.